Hi, welcome to Bake to the Future, the show where we examine what is happening in the baking industry with a future-focused lens. I'm Haley Blumenreich.
And I'm Katie Jewell. Our longtime listeners might have noticed we have taken a little break. That's because we're reconfiguring the podcast into what we hope will bring you timely information on a more consistent basis.
That's right, Katie. Our new format will be shorter episodes focusing on a single important topic and how that issue affects our industry. Much like our weekly email newsletter, these episodes give listeners and our members what they need to know. And don't worry, we'll still have in-depth conversations with key leaders in the industry, just not every episode.
All right, should we get into it for today?
Yes, let's take it away.
So there's a lot going on in the world right now, but the question that we have been getting at ABA recently the most is, how is the Russian invasion of Ukraine impacting the baking industry in the U.S.? And there's no easy answer for this, but to help us walk our way through it and figure it out is ABA's president and CEO, Robb MacKie. So Robb, how is a conflict halfway across the world affecting our industry here in the U.S.?
Yeah, no, Katie and Haley, thank you for having me back on. And this is such a difficult topic to talk about. And I don't think you can start this conversation without just saying, you know, your heart goes out. This is a humanitarian crisis of almost biblical proportion. And, you know, what's going on, you know, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine is it's upsetting. It's outrageous. It's any kind of adjective. And they all seem so inadequate to describe, you know, half a world away, this sort of sense of, you know, not being able to do much to help. And I tell you every day, I pray for Western leaders to do everything they can to do the right thing, to resolve this situation, and restore the Ukraine's independence. But that being said, totally understand the interest, and of, you know, certainly the U.S. consumer, our industry that we're so fortunate to represent. And it is interesting because you think these events are happening a world away. They're playing out in live, you know, right in front of, on our phones, on our TVs and all of that. But it is already having an impact. First and foremost, the human impact. We have members that have, you know, we've got members that have international presence. They're in Ukraine or Ukraine and Russia. And the stories that they're sharing about how they're trying to help their people through this, you know, and it goes beyond, you know, the typical business issues. But, you know, so there's folks in our industry that are on the front line. I've been in contact with some of the folks that we've had an opportunity to meet from the Ukrainian baking industry over the years. And I mean, they're terrified. They're terrified for their families and their country, but they're very resolved. They're very resolute. And you have so much admiration for them. In terms of, you know, what's going on here, we've already starting to see, and we were seeing really in the beginning of the year, you know, really since January 1st, we saw about an 11% increase in wheat prices. And I think some of that was baking in the anticipation that something was going to happen. But just in the last week, wheat prices have gone up 24%. And so that is going to work its way through. And I've talked to a couple of bakers who are already looking to hedge out into the future, and their prices of flour have already gone up pretty significantly. That's just one. You don't take an area of the world in Ukraine and southwestern Russia, which is one of the major wheat producing parts of the world, and not have an impact in terms of the U.S. Raw ingredient costs. Also, there's a tremendous amount of corn, there's a tremendous amount of barley, and then there's a lot of oil seeds that are produced, you know, predominantly in that region of the world. So when we talk about, as we've been talking about soybean oil, you know, one of the alternatives that could be used, you know, is sunflower oil. But now we're seeing that, you know, between the ports being shut down during the conflict, we're just starting to see some supply issues. What I am most concerned about and what I hear most about is, what if this drags on into the spring planting season in the Ukraine and Southwest Russia, and the crops don't get into the ground? And so now you're taking, again, one of the major bread baskets of the world out of production. That will have a significant impact in terms of the price of U.S. wheat, Canadian wheat, you know, around the world. So that is a big issue. The other issue that people are not really focused in on yet, which is really important, is the price of natural gas. And you can't fire a bakery oven without natural gas, at least here in the United States. And so we've seen, the price of natural gas has gone up 15% since February 1st. And so that's going to have an impact. That's another major input cost for the baking industry. And where am I going with all of this? I think you're going to see, on top of record food inflation, 7.2% year over year already this year, that is going to have an impact. Now, our bakers and our millers and all up and down the supply chain are going to do everything they can to mitigate that cost as much as they can. But, we've been in this day-to-day mode for 2 years. This could not have come, not to minimize the humanitarian crisis on the ground, but in terms of food inflation around the world and here in the United States, this could not have come at a worse time.
And that's just so much to unpack. I've been trying to visualize what how large of a wheat producing region this is. And I think, Rob, you and I were talking earlier this week about it would be as if we took the states of like Kansas, Illinois, North Dakota, these big wheat producing states, and said, okay, you guys can no longer send your wheat out. And that's basically what's happening right now. And so I know when I've been thinking about it and talking to media, I try to put it in that perspective. Like, imagine, yes, you can grow wheat elsewhere. Yes, you can't, you can do all these things elsewhere, but really this is the heart. And so even though it's a world away, all of these food ecosystems and supply chains are very much interwoven. So wheat that's grown and corn that's grown in Ukraine is sent as feedstock to China for the animals there. It's mind-boggling that this is happening at such a large scale on top of, as we're still in a pandemic, guys. It's just mind-boggling to me. And, I don't know if you have any anecdotes or any specific stories from the folks that you've spoken with from our Ukrainian friends in the baking industry. Do you have any examples? Like, are they still going into the plants? What's kind of happening over there?
No, that's a great question, Katie. If they're in Western Ukraine, some plants, and I'll admit some of this information is a day or two old, but they were still able to operate plants in the western part of Ukraine. They were still able to get employees, but if they were in Kyiv or, closer to the Russian border or northern border along Belarus, those plants have been out of production. And it's a very real, we talk about the humanitarian crisis that's happening, is as that food production gets shut down throughout the country, people are literally going to be scrambling for food in the Ukraine. Now, it's a horrible situation, but I have to tell you, what's restored a bit of my faith in humanity is when I see what's going on in the refugee areas of Poland and other parts around the Ukraine and the outpouring of support, including food supplies. We all saw Jose Andres, who came and talked to our group a number of years ago about, the Puerto Rican situation. He's there on the ground right now, and he's probably the most visible example of that. But, Catholic Relief Services and, the International Red Cross are doing an amazing amount of work to get basic food stuff in. And so in the midst of this horrible humanitarian crisis in this war zone, you are seeing those signs of just our basic humanity, the goodness of our humanity. So, and I know I'm way off topic and I apologize for that, but, we're looking for bright lights and that's one of them. And, I know our family is doing what we can to support those folks. And I know many others in the industry are doing the same thing.
In your time at ABA, have you seen anything like this before?
I just celebrated it's hard to believe, the start of my 27th year at ABA. I've never seen a situation like this. We've had, times, I was thinking back, 2007, 2008, we had this huge spike for a variety of reasons in wheat prices and other grain prices. But, we didn't see spikes in natural gas. We didn't see spikes in other basic ingredients that the industry relies on. And so we've got this moment in time. And again, we have been stressing our food supply chain pretty significantly over the last couple of years. And so, we add this on top of it, another major disruption. I've never seen a situation, and I've talked to a lot of folks. I talked to Bill McCurry, who is he just celebrated his 50 years as an ASB member. He's been in this industry almost 60 years. He's retired now. And I had a long conversation with him the other day, and I said, Bill, you've seen it all. I mean, you saw the 74 grain embargo. You saw a lot of different things. Is there anything that remotely compares to this? And he just, he paused. He could not. And if you know Bill, he's very loquacious. He just paused and was very silent for a while. And then he just shook his head and said no.
Jeez. And you were recently in Chicago for ASB's meeting. Kind of what was the tone? What were you were listening, you were talking to members. Kind of what's the feeling right now? Is everybody just kind of like cautiously waiting to see what happens with the ingredients markets and this conflict?
Yeah, there was interesting in that there was a sense of euphoria from the perspective of after 2 years. And people don't remember that ASB meeting in February of 2020 was the last industry gathering. So it's somehow appropriate that ASB 22 was the first regathering of size of the industry. And so there was just a euphoric feeling of getting the industry back together. Unfortunately, that was very much tempered by, the reaction about what's going on in the Ukraine, just further uncertainty about, how the industry. But I think there was some resolve in the sense of that whatever comes, we've learned a lot in the last 2 years. We've become very resilient, very adaptable. But there was very serious concern, not only for the industry impact and commodity prices and things like that, but really also for the state of the world and the state of our leadership, both in the United States and in Europe. And so, it's just another really troubling time. It just feels like one major traumatic event after the next.
All right. Well, thank you for all of that, Rob. And I know that this is not going to be the last conversation. Unfortunately, I have a feeling this is going to be around for a while. And even if the conflict is not, certainly the ramifications and the kind of aftershocks of what's happening now will continue. So I'm certain that this is not going to be the only conversation we have on this topic. And then maybe next time we can talk a little bit more about what ABA is doing, what we want to do, what our members are needing from us. I know right now it's a little bit of triage, kind of crisis mode, crisis communications. And so I think that's where we're at now. And I look forward to discussing this topic more and getting more information as things happen for our members in our industry.
I think I very much look forward to that, Katie. I do think there are some things this administration could do right away in the energy sector.
What do you think? What are you thinking?
Well, I think, clearly let's turn the spigots back on. Let's get Keystone going. Let's get the other pipelines going. Let's explore and get more natural gas flowing so that we're not as dependent on foreign sources of our energy. And I know that runs smack into their climate agenda. But I think if not now, we've got to address that, and then we can deal with the climate issues going forward. But we have a humanitarian crisis on our hands, and it could end up having a significantly negative impact on those that can least afford it here in the United States, the most vulnerable in our society. Do we want to see their food bills go up another 7% or 10% or whatever that number shakes out? So I think there's some things that this administration can do in the short term that might take some of that pressure off.
Yeah, certainly. I know that when I see the headlines about how Ukraine is a leader in wheat and edible oils, which are both very important ingredients for us and topics that we address and pursue relief for, I was like, okay, this is going to be a whole thing that I know that we're going to be involved in, and we'll see how it all unfolds.
Yep. And
we'll be there. So thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. And you can let us know what you thought of the show by emailing hello@americanbakers.org or leave us a voicemail at baketothefuture.org. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. whether it's Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, or Ghana.